let's get into it. Sitting to my left is definitely, I think there's no doubt that this is the most legendary figure in the world of hip hop in Seattle. Sir Mix-a-Lot. Everybody give him a big hand. Yeah. All right, welcome.
Glad you said in Seattle.
Nah.
You're scaring me for
We could have said West Coast. We could have said, you know, could have said a lot of things, man. So I think, like I was saying, Seattle definitely was put on the map, speaking as a New Yorker, by yourself. But I know that, you know, before it got to that level, there was a lot that, you know, went on beforehand leading up to it. Can you give us a little background about where you were coming from?
Well, Seattle was kind of interesting because back in the early 80s, Seattle had a hip hop scene, but it was just like a midget version of New York. I mean, everybody was trying to be New York. Cats were wearing hoodies and, you know, the brick rings, 4 fingers, you know, and big belt buckles and Kangos, and we had no identity. And I just made up my mind. I mean, I'm not gonna have a hit record if I'm trying to imitate New York. So I started doing some weird stuff, man, just completely retarded. It really wasn't talent-based. It was just trying to find an angle. But the music scene was kind of strange. It was kind of divided at the time. You know, you had the rock scene, which was always solid here because of Hendrix and all that stuff. And you know, you got your Dave Matthews and your Nirvana. So it was always solid. Junior Cadillac, groups like that. But hip hop was still kind of virgin. So you had a bunch of cats, we were all battling and DJ. I used to run into other cats' parties and just DJ and cut up and blow his speakers out and leave them sitting there, but it was just trying to get attention. In about 85, I decided to do a record. And not really to make money, because I wanted to scratch my own voice. I was like, ooh, I get to hear myself on a record, you know? So I met this cat named Ed Locke, another guy named Greg Jones. We put some money together and we did a total underground independent project, but without saying motherfucker every other word, you know what I mean? So it wasn't like underground sounding, but it was underground music. And we released it and we just got in vans and drove all over the country. Wow. Did free concerts and the rest is history.
Now, going back a little bit, you were saying that the scene was influenced by New York.
Yeah.
I know down in California and LA, there was a lot popping off down there as well.
Yeah.
With the Uncle Jam's Army and
Egyptian Lover and all that. You're showing your age, man.
Well.
No, yeah, you had like the LA scene was kind of, you know, further along than Seattle, and they were trying to come up with their own thing at the time. So you had cats like Egyptian Lover, like you said, Uncle Jam's Army, World Class Wrecking Crew, which featured Dr. Dre, Ice-T. You had cats like that trying to kind of come up with something down there and stirring up their own gumbo. And then gangster rap was born through Ice-T, 6 in the morning. And man, that's when the West Coast just really did something in it.
So how much of an influence did that really have in Seattle?
Major. I mean, you could watch the transformation. People in Seattle started being comfortable being from the West Coast. Because early on, you had cats trying to talk with accents like they were from New York and you know, wearing fat laces, which I did rock some fat laces today, but that's another thing. But you had cats trying to rock fat laces and be NYC, and LA made us feel comfortable being from the West Coast. It was okay to talk about, you know, palm trees and oceans and cars and music, because that's what we do. And so it definitely influenced a lot of what I was doing early on. And
were you, did you get on the radio at one point back then?
Yeah, I had a partner of mine named Nes Rodriguez, who was a DJ. He used to travel back and forth to New York. Keep in mind, I was broke. I'm talking about poor, we call it P-O. So I had no money. So I met this guy, Nes Rodriguez, at a party. I was DJing and he was like, you know, Mr. Radio DJ. So I was kind of jealous of him, but I had to swallow my pride. I met with him. He took my stuff, he put it on the radio. And it was like interesting because I had never been heard by anybody other than me, my mom, my brothers and sisters. So I thought they were gonna diss me, and people started requesting it and started liking it. And then I developed kind of a radio personality. I learned how to throw my voice from a radio. That's where I got my delivery from a radio DJ. You know, I used to just holler, ah, you know what I mean? And then I saw him and he, 1250 K-Fox, I'm like, oh shit. You know, so I kind of got the delivery, everything about me really came from the early years with Nes Rodriguez, and I kind of started meeting cats, the heavier rappers like, you know, Boogie Boys and cats like that from New York started coming out doing shows, and they would come up to the radio station, and I got the vibe with them and realized that they were real people that did music because they loved it, which is the way we all start. Then it changes. We'll talk about that later, though.
Yeah. And so Nes Rodriguez, I guess, has got to be Nasty Nes.
Nasty Nes, yeah,
course.
he's like a god up here.
Right. Can you talk, give people a little bit about background about him and sort of what his place is in the scene out here?
Well, Nasty Nes and me, we went to school together. He was a little older than me. He graduated like a couple years before me, and he was like a thug. I mean, when I met Nasty Nes, he had like a joint in one hand and a switchblade in the other. I mean, that was how. But he loved music. That was the thing we had in common. But I hadn't found myself yet musically. I just listened to music. I didn't try to produce anything. He got signed with K-Fox, which was an AM station back in the day. And hip hop really wasn't on the radio here. You know, it was strictly in clubs. And he was the first one. He had a show called Fresh Tracks. And he would fly to New York, and he'd go and dig through crates and just buy used records from New York, and he'd bring them back, and he'd play them on Fresh Tracks. And that was like, it really turned the city on. That's when kids started to really rock hip hop. You know, everybody was banging hip hop everywhere because of that show. So that's what I mean when I say he was like a god here, because he literally brought hip hop to the masses in Seattle, and he opened it up.
And he would include your own original productions in the mix?
Yeah, I had a little 4-track cassette deck. And I used to make songs on this little 4-track, and I didn't have a vocal booth, obviously, so I would take a wool blanket, and I had my little mic stand. I'd put the wool blanket over my head to get the silence, and I'd deliver my vocals underneath the blanket. I'd be sweating like hell when I got out. Yeah. And he would play this stuff, man, and it didn't sound, I mean, the quality wasn't the same, obviously, as, you know, say Run DMC or Dougie Fresh or whatever, but people still felt something, you know what I mean? They felt that it wasn't New York, it was something for us, by us.
You were representing Seattle.
Yes.
And something that they could latch on to, they could recognize. Yeah,
and then in 1986, I was comfortable, 85, 86, I got comfortable doing it. And then I said, you know what, I want to do an anthem. Because you had songs like, you know, like Cool J was talking about Queens, and everybody's talking about Brooklyn and money-making Manhattan. I said, what about Seattle? So, you know, back then, it's a lot different now for any of y'all that go out driving. Back then, we used to hang out on Broadway. It was like Dick's Burger Spot. We just hang out there and try to knock girls. That's all we did. You know, get high and knock chicks. That's all everybody did. So I said, I'm gonna do a song about it. It was like an anthem. And I had never been out of Seattle, right? So all of a sudden we get a request to play Phoenix, Arizona. I'm like, Phoenix, Arizona? They'd listen to me in Phoenix, Arizona? We go down to, keep in mind, I had no record out yet. This is no record. This is just selling tapes out of my house for $10. And we go down to Phoenix, Arizona, and we played at this little club, and it was on Broadway. And there was a Dick's Burger Spot. It was like the same scene. And then I realized, oh shit, they got Broadway everywhere. You know what I mean? And that's how I stumbled on my first hit. I thought Broadway was just a Seattle street.
So that was Posse on Broadway?
Yeah, Posse on Broadway. We released it in '87 and sold almost 2 million units so far, still sells.
And what label did that come out on?
It was Nasty Mix Records. Nasty Mix was formed by the two gentlemen I mentioned earlier, Ed Locke and Greg Jones. And it was named after myself and Nasty Nes, you know, Nasty Mix. That's where it came from, yeah.
And that must have been, were you happy with the deal, how it was structured back then? I mean, did you feel like looking back on it?
Well, keep in mind I knew nothing about the record business. And anybody in here that's even dealt with it knows that the difference between doing music because you love it and doing music for profit is night and day. And initially, I just wanted to do records. I didn't care about the deal. You know, you just tell me I'm gonna have records out and I'd sign it. So initially, I was happy. Later on, I started to learn about publishing and copyrighted material, how it's to be written, how it's to be used and not used. Mechanical royalties, things like that came later, and I realized, woo, and I found about 600 grand out there that I didn't receive. So, yeah, it got a little ugly. I mean, I guess I could easily blame him, but I don't think he knew either. I think we all went into this blind and we didn't really understand the business.
And how long did Nasty Mix last?
We started it in about late 84, early 85, and it went through about 92, 93. I left in 91. I left and signed with the great Rick Rubin.
That's right.
Yeah.
What was that experience like? I mean, he approached you, I assume?
He approached me, but he did it slick because he didn't want to be caught for tampering, right? So he had his secretary call Nasty Mix and say they were Source Magazine. And they were looking to do an interview. So I'm thinking, man, Source Magazine is calling. I'm happy as hell. And they're like, hi, this is Heidi from Deaf American. I'm like, so what? You know what I mean? I'm thinking I'm going to talk to the Source, but she says, hold on, somebody wants to talk to you. So this guy gets on the phone, you know, real short. Hey, Mix-a-Lot, Rick. I'm like, I don't know no Rick, dude. Rick Rubin. Rick, get the fuck out of here. There's no Rick Rubin, you know what I mean? Because I'm, you know, Rick Rubin, for those of you who don't know, I mean, that's Beastie Boys, I mean, LL Cool J, Public Enemy. He was the man, him and Russell Simmons. And he said, he told me he started his own label. There was no more Def Jam for him. He was doing his own thing. He started Deaf American. And I still didn't take him serious. So he said, why don't you come down to LA and meet with me? I hear your deal's falling apart. I'm like, cool. So my manager and myself, we fly down to LA. And he picks us up in I'm not lying, this is no shit, a 69 Dodge, right? It has holes in his pants. I'm like, dude, man, what are we doing down here? You know what I mean? But he sits me down in this label, and this is what I mean by the difference between doing music because you love it and doing music for profit. He sits me down in this room and he breaks out these ink blots, these little ink blots of different, like outlines of artists, right? And there was one artist with a hat sideways and I could see a clock. I said, that's Flavor Flav. And there was one with a cat standing like this with a Kango. I said, that's Run DMC. And he showed me one of myself and I didn't know who it was. I'm like, I don't know who that is. He said, there's your problem. You gotta discover yourself. You gotta make something, create something of yourself, and then put it out there to the masses. You need an image. And that's where the hat and the furs, it was a video I had done called My Hoopty. And we used, I had the old pimp hat, the old Mac Daddy hat with the big furs, and he said, that's it, that's you. And that's cool initially, but after a while, it hurts because you realize that, man, why am I doing this? Am I doing this just for the money? You know what I mean? You start questioning your love and your loyalty to it.
Mm-hmm. So it was difficult to kind of maintain, to be comfortable in that image after a while.
Yeah, because people, you know, we did Baby Got Back, and then, you know, people started to expect. I mean, you had guys walking up with their girlfriends, literally, turning their girlfriends around. Yo, does she got ass? And I'm like, dude, I'm not the ass doctor. I mean, you know, I just kind of, you know, I mean, and that was cool for a while, but then when you get into recording the next album and you try to do something different and you want to, artistically, you want to grow, the label doesn't want you to grow. The label's like, no. We want more of, you know, we give us Baby Got Back, we like Baby Got Front, Baby Got Side, whatever you can come up with, just stay in this box. And if you only do music because you want to make money, you're fine with that. But I love music. And so that is why I asked, after one more album, I asked to be released. And a lot of people thought I was committing career suicide. But, you know, sometimes you have to look in the mirror, man, and you go, am I doing this just for the check? Or am I doing this because I love it? And I realized I was doing it for the check. So I pulled out and started doing independent stuff again. So
what kind of advice could you give to somebody who might be sort of starting out on that path? Is it possible to find a middle ground?
Yeah, it is. It really is. And I think I would say to any artist coming up, especially when you just signing your deal, give them what you are initially. Because what I did was I went, well, I'll make a little package of all my commercially viable records and I'll give this to them. And they'll go, yeah, that's what we want, and it worked. But the problem is I held back the Hip Hop Soldier, National Anthem, all those songs that I had done that earned me a lot of respect in the hip hop community. I kind of hid those songs from Rick Rubin, so he had no idea what that was. All he knew was the pop side. So I would tell any artist coming up now, be what you are going in the door, and you can stay that way. That's why I love groups like, you know, The Roots, Lauryn Hill, groups that stayed true to what they were going in, and then you can stay that way. You know, even Metallica. And I was into the, you know, stuff way back in the day, like Gary Newman and stuff. And what I liked about Gary Newman, he didn't give a shit if he made a hit record or not. You know, he just recorded stuff. And it was like this, out here I listened to it, they laughed at me. This guy with this English accent, but I loved that shit because he was being who he was. And you know, the Sex Pistols, Ramones, Circle Jerks, I listen to all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, because it is what it is. You know, I'm not a Britney Spears fan. Nah.
And so, I mean, you really incorporated a lot of that kind of rock guitar sound.
Yeah, I love rock. I fell in love with rock initially at a concert, man. I mean, I loved it in the early 80s, late 70s, but then in the mid 80s, it sucked. It was like a bunch of big hair and tight pants, and I just wasn't feeling it. And then I went to a concert in the mid 90s. I went to see Korn. And I think there was like Limp Bizkit, Korn, and one other act. And the energy was real. You know what I mean? I mean, it was like mosh pit, sweating, people running into each other. I'm like, that's music. That's what it should do to people. It shouldn't be about style and, you know, who has on the biggest jewel, the biggest necklace and the nicest gems. And that's not music. You know what I mean? And I was into that for a minute, so I can say it and not worry about comeback because I was there. I had a chain so goddamn big I could whoop your ass with it. I mean, it was just, I'm serious, man. I bought my first Benz, man. I bought this Benz that was like, check this out. This is stupid. I'm gonna tell you guys this. I bought a Benz, brand new, $80,000. Back then that was a lot. You know, now $80,000 you get a used one. Bought an $80,000 Benz that was silver. I took it across the street and had it painted candy apple red, with a gold grill, gold mirrors, gold wheels, two-tone interior, just dumb shit. And I brought it home and I'm living in the hood, right? I mean, so that's the kind of stuff I was doing. And then when I started to love it again, and when I went to this show in the mid-90s, it woke me up. Because I was like, you know, I was looking at these guys on stage, they weren't wearing jewelry. You know, it wasn't about how big they were, how much money, it was just about being real. And I remember one thing in specific, watching the group Disturbed, there was a guy crowd surfing in a wheelchair, right? And they pull him up, and I didn't know who they were calling, like, bring your fucking ass here. I'm like, what, are they gonna fight somebody else? And they pull this guy up on his wheelchair, and he goes, you won't see this at no fucking hip hop concert. And I was like, I wanted to whoop his ass initially, but then I went, he's telling the truth. You know what I mean? Because hip hop, we've kind of become what we used to hate. We don't see it now because you have, you know, Clear Channel and MTV kind of control the industry now. And they tell us that it's normal. But it's not normal, it's abnormal. What's real is groups that really do music because they love it. It's not, these guys now are made. You know what I mean? It's like cats that can't even rap, but they got big chests or been shot 2 or 3 times, and that's how you make a hit record nowadays, I guess. Yeah.
Back when Posse on Broadway hit, you were out on tour with NWA, Hammer. That must have been
that was one tour too.
Experience. Was that one tour?
Yeah, it was us, MC Hammer, Public Enemy, NWA, and Stetson Sonic.
Ooh.
That was one tour, dude. You can't do that shit now. But I mean, back then, because hip hop was more about togetherness. It wasn't about, you know, the gangster hates the pop. It wasn't like that. And keep in mind, this is pre-Baby Got Back, so I'm still kind of new to the game. And Public Enemy, and that's where I get all my game from, really. I mean, Chuck D and Ice-T almost kind of took me under their wing and showed me the game. Because I remember doing interviews, man, and you overdo your cool. You know what I mean? You try to get beeped out as much as you can on the radio because it makes you, you know, so, well, you know, I had this bitch, right? You know, I socked the bitch in the face because she was tripping with a motherfucker. So that's how we was, because we wanted to be cool, you know? And then Chuck D pulls me to the side. He's like, dude, you're articulate, man. You're bright. Why are you hiding it? And I thought about saying, yeah, it is true. I do kind of act stupid when I'm on camera. And he said, cut that shit out. That's not you, man. Be who you are. Relax. And that's kind of where me came back into the game. I mean, that was the coolest tour we got blown off the stage. I ain't gonna lie to you, because I'd never seen shows like that, not in hip hop. They don't do it no more. I mean, this is back when like Public Enemy had the S1Ws and shit moving around and skits, and NWA had the big street thing on stage like Crenshaw Avenue, and cats really gave up shows, but once again, they were doing it because they loved it. And it was, you know, you're not making money when you're doing a stage show like that. You know, I mean, you're making a little bit, but it's not really worth your time unless you love it. Now you get two guys in a cassette deck and they lip sync.
You got all over the country at that point?
Yeah, we started up in the East Coast, which terrified me, right? Because it's like I was never really the East Coast artist, but when we got to the South, I found a second home.
Really?
Yeah, we did some offbeat shows. Like, we'd come off of the tour, we have 2 days off, and we did some shows with Luke Skywalker. Whew, man. Like, I could just watch his show and not even perform, you know what I mean? So we learned quickly, never open for a dude that's got a bunch of naked women on stage. Yeah, because his show was incredible. So it's kind of weird because I was around when hip hop was born. So to kind of see it, the evolution and de-evolution to a certain extent, it's kind of interesting.
Yeah. As far as the de-evolution goes and what's happening right now, do you think that, there is potential for kind of, what the root, we had a Quest from the Roots up here yesterday, right. And he was talking about, the sort of frustrating aspect of being on a major label, trying to break through.
It's hard,
and
man.
at the same time doing your own thing. I mean, as far as like straight up hip hop goes, are you seeing artists out there who are really keeping their integrity while selling?
Yeah, I mean, there are some artists that are able to, the Roots, I mean, perfect example, but it ain't easy. It ain't easy because when you do a meaningful song that lyrically has some depth and has some real cool production, labels won't push it. You know what I mean? I mean, right now is what I call the kick and clap era. So now, like, every track, just take your 2,000, get you a nice group of hand claps, slide them off time a little bit so they clack, and that's it. Boom, clash, clash, boom, clash, boom. That's what everybody's doing right now, you know what I mean? And then that'll phase and we'll go to somewhere else. But it really is hard when you want to get away from kick and clap and you want to actually say something in a track. The label's not going to push it. So you have to then, when you do your shows, you have to throw it out there. And that's hard to do. It's hard to do because you piss your pop fans off. Right. Dude, get the baby guy back. I don't want to hear this shit. I mean, you get a lot of that. So you got to kind of balance it. And it's I mean, you'll notice the artists that are doing it, they really will push, Erykah Badu. She's one that will go on say, a show like Dave Chappelle and go, okay, here's my hit, but then I'm going to do this. And you really have to dig in your heels and go, this is what I'm going to do. And you have to give it to them. And
yet then they'll get hated by their crossover audience.
Yeah, exactly. Your crossover audience, then they get pissed and you got to give them something. So you get a lot of that. I think there also is a divisive side of hip hop that's starting to scare me. And that was what I call the term, the keep it real cats. That can actually stifle creativity. And what I mean by that is, you'll never hear me say that Will Smith is a sellout, because he wasn't a gangster. So what do you want him to do? You want him to pull on a sock hat and pull out a 9 and claim that he's, dumping millimeters in the motherfucker's head? That's not him. So that's dangerous because of it, just his acting ability alone, he brings attention from the masses to hip hop. So you don't want to alienate him. You don't want to put him out there on an island. You want to embrace him. So you have a lot of cats kind of doing that, and they draw this line in the middle of the street. And if you don't, drink 2 beers, shoot 2 people, fuck 2 hoes in the middle of by track 3, you're a sellout. And that kind of shit is dangerous. Yeah, I know, no shit, that'll hurt hip hop, but you can kind of see people getting away from that now, and necessity breeds creativity. So I think it's going to go back to where it was. It constantly does this.
So what path have you taken to kind of stay involved in music and be creative and try and reconcile these?
Well, I hit a wall, man, around 1997, a serious wall. I mean, creatively, I couldn't come up with nothing. And I didn't know why. It took me a long time to figure out why, but the reason was I was trying to figure out what you wanted. You know what I mean? It wasn't about here. It was about, I wonder what that chick over there, she looks like the kind of person I'd like to buy my records. I wonder what she likes. And you're trying to figure your audience out and this demographic shit. I bought into it. And that's when like I said, around 97 is when I asked to be released from American, and Rick let me go, which is kind of cool because he could have made a whole lot. He owed me another advance and I walked away from probably about another $500,000. But I kind of found myself again one day. I met another artist, a cat that's been touring with me forever, ever. But when I say I met him, what I mean is I didn't know he wanted to do a record. His name is Out of Sight. And I got in the studio and he wanted to record some stuff, and I started giving him just the straight hip hop. Whatever, back then everybody was doing the Tupac sound, right? West Coast, some kind of melodic R&B sound and shit. He was like, man, I don't want this shit. Everybody's doing that. I want some rock shit. Rock? I said, but you rap, so let's do something weird. And we did it, and it was like nobody had ever done anything like it before, and we started vibing, and I'm like, that's what I ain't doing no more. He didn't care what everybody wanted. It was just about doing something that he dug, and it worked, because that got me out of my funk quick, you know, and I started making good music again. I mean, I got probably 40 tracks at home that I'm probably gonna be releasing over the next 4 or 5 years. It'll be pretty solid. Cats are gonna be surprised when they hear them.
What else have you gotten into? I heard, you know, a lot of, you know, the ringtone scene is kind of popping off.
Well, one thing
rewinding
also, and going back to, you said, could I give an artist any advice? Keep your publishing. Oh my God, I mean, that's the one thing we all let go, and I didn't do that, thank God, but a lot of artists, they sign a deal and, you know, I give you $1 million and I say, well, look, here's the deal. Your 10 songs that you release on this record, I'll basically own 50% of them, and here's $1 million. And most guys would do that because they probably came from nothing, but I didn't do it because of the experience I went through with Nasty Mix. I was able to hang on to the publishing, and that brings me back to your question. In, I'd say around 2000, 2001, we started getting phone calls from Universal. And Universal is, we have a co-publishing deal for Baby Got Back, but I own 87% of the song. I wouldn't give it up. Well, Universal said there's this new thing called ringtones, and everybody's in there. I said, what the hell's a ringtone? You know, you call a phone and all this shit happens. I'm like, yeah, whatever. You know, I didn't think nothing about it, but I said, well, go ahead, do what you want to do. You know, put the stuff out there. So Ricardo calls me one day. Ricardo's my manager, and he goes, dude, we got a check for like 300 grand. What happened? I'm like, oh, I didn't do nothing. I just told these guys they could use these ringtone things, and I realized, whoa, shit, there's money in this stuff. So cats are coming back now, buying old school songs and putting them on their ringers. So I started producing more of them. I started doing offshoots. I took like Baby Got Back and made a specific ringtone of it where I'm rapping about answering the phone and just crazy stuff like that. But that wouldn't be able to happen if I didn't own my publishing and stuff like that. I mean, you listen to the stories people like Little Richard tell, and it's sad, because these guys, if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't be here, but they don't own their publishing.
So what kind of, to somebody starting out, what kind of deal would be realistic for them to work out with the label that might approach somebody and want to put their music out? Yeah,
that's a good question, because right now, anybody in this room that doesn't have a deal, that goes to sign a deal, you ain't getting all your publishing. Because there's some unwritten rule, and I hate the record business, in case you didn't notice. There's some unwritten rule in this game that says 25% of your publishing has to go to the label no matter what. And every time I ask, why is that? Oh, it just is. You know, and if you don't sign it, you don't get paid. But the label will not try to take that remaining 75%. That remaining 75%, we're so used to getting screwed in the ass on this that we call it 100%. We're just used to it. So the 100% of the 75 is power. It really is, because, and the labels will let you keep that. It's the publishing companies that will try to get that from you. They'll come to you after you ink your record deal. They're going to come to you and say, well, look, we really like that new song you got, and you know, we'd like to administer publishing on it. And I didn't know what administer publishing meant.
So what is that? What are they doing?
Basically, they're doing what you're supposed to do. They're going to take your song when it sells, and they're going to call everybody that collects money, everybody that makes money on your shit. They're going to say, we need that publishing money in. Money that's going to come to you anyway. By law, you have to get it. So the only thing a publishing company the only thing they can really do for you, in my opinion, is to place your songs in stuff like movies, commercials, ringtones, things of that sort. That's where you make money. They are not beneficial to you, in my opinion, at all if they are not performing. Most of them do not perform. Most of them just sit around and, let's say Starbucks uses your song in a commercial. Starbucks pays them the money they would otherwise pay you. Mm-hmm. They collect that money on your behalf, They take 25%, 30%, whatever deal you guys worked out, and they send you the rest every 6 months. That's it.
So you're talking about 25% of that 75?
Of the 75, yeah. Yeah, the other 25, you just, but now here's the good thing. If they're a hardworking publishing company, and they go out and place Baby Got Back, say, in Charlie's Angels, give you an example. The record company, if you re-record it, here's the thing, if you own your publishing, and they take Baby Got Back, Rick Rubin would get a piece of it for master use. However, if Charlie's Angels comes back and says, look, we're offering $200,000 to use that song, but Rick Rubin wants $50,000 for master use, we'll give you $25,000 to re-record it because you own the publishing, you just re-record it. I ain't supposed to be saying this stuff, but you re-record it and you put it out there and you make your money, man. As an artist, there's nothing wrong with making money. Don't feel guilty about it, because if you don't, somebody else will. Believe me.
So explain what you mean when you say Rick Rubin owns the mastering, gets the mastering rights to it.
Yeah, that's
something that might not be understood.
Yeah, when I say publishing, it's your written works, your lyrics, and cats that are producing on drum machines, because that's what I do. Don't think that that's not your music. That's your music, and that's the written work. But the actual master is the recording. So let's say you take that music, you take those lyrics, you put them together, you make this song, that song is put out by his company. He owns that actual master, that recording, but you own the written work. So if Starbucks says, we want to use that song, but we don't want this guy, he wants $1 million, we want him out of the loop, we'll pay you 300 grand, which is what you're going to get from him anyway, let's be honest. You can then re-record your works. You could change the music a little bit, change stuff a little bit, because you own the publishing, you can record it and he's out of the mix completely. And that's the difference between master and publishing. Yeah, I've been screwed a lot, so I know.
Yeah, it's good. You know, us people starting out definitely need to know the ways to avoid the pitfalls.
And I learned it from listening to Chuck D, Ice-T, Run from Run DMC. I mean, these guys gave me a lot of information coming up, because when I was coming up, I could care less. It's like, man, I'm gonna get a check with more than 1 0. This is gonna be awesome. You know what I mean? I didn't matter to me.
Excellent. Yeah. So after you did end up re-recording Baby Got Back.
A few times. I've done it a whole lot of different ways. Yeah. Pimp it. What the hell? You know?
And you figure you own what, 80 something?
87.5.
87.5.
87.5. So now I own 87.5% of the Baby Got Back album, which is Mac Daddy, and the album after that. The rest of the album I own 100%. I have 6 albums, so I own all of those other records. So like when it came to the ringtones, when I did Posse on Broadway, 100%. When E40 re-recorded it, 100%. Now when I did the Target commercial, I own 87.5. They come to me first, and then we go to Universal, and then Universal does what they're supposed to do, because they got to earn that 13.5% or whatever. They went or 12.5. They went and cut the deal, and they get a lot of money, boy. When they know they're going to get only 13%, they're like, God damn, we got to massage this, squeeze it out. And I re-recorded the thing for Target, because when they went to Rick Rubin for master, he wanted 300-400 grand. So we re-recorded it. And that's the advantage of owning your own publishing. You can do stuff like that.
Excellent. Is it possible to recapture your publishing after the fact if you've given it up?
It's hard. It's hard, because a lot of times labels hold it for, it's like 20 years, I think, is normal to keep your stuff 20 years. And sometimes it's 20 years after you're fully recouped, which is even worse. So in other words, if I give you $1 million up front, say for your record, and there's creative ways they have of showing you haven't recouped. Oh God, that's a whole other subject. But basically the clock doesn't start ticking till I get my $1 million back. And that could take 5 years. So you might be talking 25 years before the publishing reverts back to you. Well, by that time, you're on Oprah talking about how poor you are, and then some other asshole comes up and gives you, 100 grand and takes you for another 20 years. I mean, and that's how bad it is. But that's the business, really. I mean, it's just that bad.
So when you're talking about recouping, basically what happens when you sign a deal,
Yeah.
they are more or less loaning you
Yep, they're
the
loaning
money
you. I used
at
to
a
call
bad
it,
interest rate.
oh yeah, I used to call it style points. That's just style money. You know, you go out and look really cool and look really rich, but you're really living on somebody else's dollars.
And you have to make that money back.
Yeah, and now it's not as bad as it used to be. I mean, I was watching What's Love Got to Do with It? I saw like Ike Turner had to go do concerts and get money and give this up and sell cars. Now, it's not that bad. But what it is if I were to give you $1 million advance for your record, as your record sells, all that money goes to me. 100% of those royalties go to me as the label until you earn back that $1 million. And that sounds cool until you look at how they do things. Give you an example of what record companies do, and they'll never admit this. This guy's an independent promoter. He promotes records, say, on the East Coast, New York, Philly, DC, Baltimore, whatever. That's what he does. He charges me 40 grand to work the East Coast for your record, right? I tell him to send you, well, me really, but send your manager a bill for 200 grand, right? He only charged me 40. I'm gonna give him another 20 to tell that lie. So here's 60 grand, tell him you charged me 200 grand. What does that mean to you? Now you owe me 1.2, not 1. So when I get, the rest of that money is gravy. I'm making money and he's making money, and that's what I hate about the business. It's sad, but that's what goes on. You know, the payola issues, paying, you know, radio stations to play you. A lot of companies got tagged for that, you know. So what Clear Channel did to get around that is they go and take you, the artist, because you're not making any money, because he and I just kind of screwed you out of another 120 grand or whatever. So you go and you say you're in Chicago. Clear Channel owns a station in Chicago. Payola is illegal. In other words, what I mean by that, I can't give him 20 grand to pay the big station in Chicago to play your record. Those days are gone. But what Clear Channel can do, because they own the record, the radio station, they can say, you do this show that you would otherwise charge me $20,000 for, you're gonna do it free so I can play your record. That's still payola, but the artist gets screwed. You know, and those are the things about the business that nobody talks about. Because if an artist signed to a label talks about it, he probably won't be an artist signed to a label the next morning. So that's the kind of stuff that you really have to watch out for.
That still goes on, I mean, to this day.
Oh, man, yeah.
It's recently, there's been a lot of stuff coming out about exactly what you say, where artists go to the radio station, and the radio station will have a special concert, you know, to promote the station, where the artist is basically doing it for nothing.
A Cube Summer Jam here locally. I mean, I'm not knocking Cube. I'm friends with Eric Powers and these guys, but let's just talk facts. At a Cube, if you go to Cube Summer Jam, you'll notice that they'll have one anchor artist. Your lead artist, say Snoop Dogg, whatever. Snoop comes, he's the closing act. Snoop's getting paid. All the other artists, you'll notice they're fairly new artists, and they have new records, and they need radio play. None of them get paid. They get a hotel room and they get a plane flight. They come up, they do the show. Each one of those artists would probably otherwise be getting $5,000, $10,000 a night. And that's payola, and it's legal, but it's still payola. It's still, the record company is basically paying Clear Channel. Now, if Clear Channel or Cube was doing this show and truly about the music, the show should be free. Mm-hmm. Or just enough to pay the expenses, but it's not. They charge you $50 a ticket and the artists get nothing. And that's the way it works. Now, I'm not saying that like, ooh, that's so bad, because if I was a new artist and I'm gonna get heavy rotation, I'm gonna do it. And I'm gonna get rich. I mean, I remember when Genuine came out with the song Pony, and he played up here 3 times before he had a record out. And I was like, man, this guy's really getting screwed over. And then when the song came out, he was #1 on Cube. So, necessary evil, I guess.
It's sort of a gamble that the airplay is going to push the sales up.
Oh, dude, let me tell you, I went to Houston, Texas one time, and I did a show like that. I call them payola shows. I did a payola show, and the day of the show, I heard my voice on the radio. It's like, makes a lot tonight in Houston, blah, blah, blah. The next day, gone. They didn't play me again. So now I got a new tactic I pull. It's like with my new artists, I tell them, well, you want Out of Sight to do a show in Yumfuck, Kansas somewhere. I tell them, I say, okay, I'll tell you what you're gonna do. You're gonna play his record for a month leading into the show, and then he'll come down and do it. That's about the best you can ask, really. And if they play it for a month, hopefully by then it catches fire. Once it catches fire, they have to play it. If the powers that be at Clear Channel say play it.
So if somebody, you know, has a choice, you know, with the internet and the way that things are now, it's a lot easier to kind of do things on your own as an independent, set things up. I mean, what do you think the advantages are of doing that as opposed to trying to get with a major label?
Well, the advantages are huge. Problem is, I don't think artists have truly figured out how to do it.
Right.
I mean, the internet has opened so many doors, and I think we're all collectively scared to walk through them. We're scared of what might be on the other side. Well, what's the worst thing that can happen? You didn't sell records on Tuesday. Well, you didn't sell any Monday either. Don't worry about it. I mean, but I think if you can succeed independently, and success on an independent level is a lot different than on a major. If you get on a major label right now and sell 200,000 records, you're a failure, which is kind of stupid. But on an indie level, I mean, you're going from making $1 a record to about $8 a record. You know what I mean? So you figure you put $2 of that back into yourself or back into the artist, you know, you're making $5, $6 a record. If you sell 20,000 units, record labels notice that. Believe me, Linkin Park tried to get signed for years, kept getting turned down, kept getting turned down. Linkin Park went and released their record on the internet. Warner Brothers picked them up. Warner Brothers didn't even remember that they had dropped them before. You know, they didn't even remember that. We didn't like you guys. It's like, oh, you guys are moving units. And I think you can live in a town anywhere, you know, and you move some units, they find you. I mean, I just signed a deal with Notting Hill in England, and he found out about what I was doing, you know, on the indie level or getting ready to do it. And he's like, he wants to touch it now, you know. So they will find you when you make some noise. So and plus, if you do it right, and if you succeed even a little bit, the biggest problem we have, and I say we, I mean the artists, is that we have a tendency to take the money, spend it all, and not think about the next project. So when the next project comes, you're like, how the hell are we gonna pay for this? Well, you might want to sell that fucking Bentley you just bought, you know what I mean? So I mean, that's the kind of problems that we have. But if the money's managed right, and you succeed on the independent level, the majors will come running, but you may not want them. I mean, if you're making $7, $8 a record and you're moving 100,000 units every 4 months, do the math. I mean, you're gonna go from $6, $7 a record to about $1, $1.50 a record. And then don't forget, this independent guy over here is gonna still be pocketing a lot of your cash. And they do the same thing with video producers. The video may have really cost 100, but they tell you 200. You don't have to deal with that on the indie level because you control your own destiny. So most hugely successful independent artists never go major. Perfect example is Tech Nine. Tech Nine's an artist out of Kansas City, probably the best rapper on the planet. His skills are just off the Richter scale, and he has been doing it forever. His audience is lock solid. He came to Seattle a couple weeks ago and just used flyers, sold the showbox out. You have artists that are on the radio every day can't sell the showbox out. And he's making a lot of money. He's making about $7 a record doing it, and he just turned Universal down. I was like, wow, how much did they offer you? He said, it was a lot, but it wasn't enough. And that's the luxury you have when you do it yourself. Because it used to be back in the day, you needed the label. You needed the label to pay for your studio, but man, come on, we could all use Reason, Pro Tools. There's so much stuff out here now that we can do it ourselves. So that part of it, they're not even necessary. The only thing they're good for is promoting the record. That's it. And if you can do that even a third as well as they can, you make way more money. So fuck them.
So what are you using to make music these days? What are you into?
The tech stuff, that's what I love, man.
Let's get into it.
I know we were gonna talk about that stuff. I'm a button head, knob head. I mean, anything new, I buy it. You know, I use Reason, but I only use the drum machine side of it because I don't really like the sequencer. It tends to be a little bit too robotic for me. But I use, I got an MPC 2000, an MPC 3000. I just got rid of my MPC 4000. I got a Roland MV 8000 drum machine. I use Pro Tools heavy. I mean, I'm a Pro Tools fanatic. Like I said, a lot of reason. I just bought Serato, which is awesome. I love that program. I use the CDJs. I just bought the new Mackie mixer with the optical fader. I mean, I use a lot of synthesizers. I buy synths sometimes for one project. I mean, I may hear a sound on a synth and go, damn, that would sound cool in this track. And I might buy it just to use it in one track, you know, and then sell it to the next cat. Or if I see a cat that's up and coming, it's like I was. Here, man, whatever, give me half price, you take it. So anything that's new is at my studio. I mean, I just bought that huge ass, I forget who makes this big controller, big keyboard controller thing. I'm loving that thing. And I got some old vintage stuff. I just sold a Jupiter 8.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I sold it to Bruce, I don't know, whatever guy's name from 9 Inch Nails. Yeah, I had a Jupiter 6. I got a Roland Juno 106. I got all that old stuff, man. I can't believe how much old stuff I got. I got an old Electro Harmonics vocoder, man, made in the 70s. That shit sounds wicked. Yeah, a lot of that old stuff.
Are you still sampling?
Yeah, I still sample, man, and I don't sample from records, unless they're sound effects records, because I kind of had the luxury of coming up in music before sampling was really, samplers didn't exist in the early 80s, so I had to make music and make sounds. So when samplers did come about, you know, they only had microphone plug-ins, so we would just sample rocks and dropping shit and whatever we could come up with to make music. And so I'm back to doing that again, and it makes your song sound so much cooler, because nowadays everybody just buys like a Korg Triton and just uses the factory sounds, so all the songs sound alike. I'd rather get a sampler and just go outside and find shit. I mean, I've used things like on my Bumposaurus album, I have a pond in my backyard, and we had these big flat slate rocks, throw them up in the air, and pow, and then we use that for a snare. You know what I mean? That's the kind of stuff I'm into. Kick drums. I'll take a kick drum and I might layer up 4 or 5 different sounds, and I'm real picky about that stuff. You know, I use a spectrum analyzer on just about every sample to
What
watch
does that do?
Well, what I do, like say I want to make a really thick kick, but I don't want to just use an 808, which is the easy way to make a kick thick. I may want a good short thud, like a boom, just a good solid thud that I'm going to have my drummer trigger in a concert or whatever. And what I'll do, I'll say take my main kick that may be real hot from about 50 hertz to about 100, and then I'll take little accenting sounds and throw them on the outside of it. Like say from 100 to 150 hertz, I may have some kind of a paper kick. And then from about 50 hertz on down, I may just literally put a mic to my throat and go, and I'll take those sounds and put them together. And then you don't have frequencies arguing with one another, but you have a big, thick, wide kick drum. I love doing stuff like that. I mean, that's the geek side of me. You know, and I'll sit there and sometimes I work on a sample for 2-3 hours.
On like say one individual kick drum?
Yeah. I have like 10,000 kicks, man. Out of the land of 10,000 kicks, that's my house, man. I got all kind of kicks, snares, hi-hats. I've been now working with a lot of drummers who hate pads. Drummers hate pads. Who they hate like the Roland V. I have the Roland V drum kit, and they hate that shit. So I try to make it sound as accurate as I can. You know, so I go and sample toms from like legendary kits and stuff. Yeah, that's what I do. Anytime I go in the studio, I was looking at that kit upstairs. I'm like, come in here with a mic, boom, 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 boom. You know, and I sample all that stuff, man. Yeah.
How do you keep track of everything? That's a hard thing.
Name your samples. I used to not name them, and then you open up a folder and it just says audio file 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm like, oh shit. And you're sitting there listening to them, you know. So what I do as I sample them, I name them. And it's names that only mean something to me, you know. It might be watery kick, that might be a kick that has a blah. And I have like certain types of sounds, I give them similar names. You know, like if it feels like it's something that fits like say house or trance or something like that, I'll name it. Trance kick blank or whatever. That way you can kind of stay connected. Because when you have an artist standing over you and you're working on his stuff, he don't have time for you to be boom, 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 you know? I was like, dude, I want a kick that sounds like this song. And you listen to it and you go, oh, that's Watery Kick 8. You know, and just grab it, man. Yeah, I'm a file fanatic.
Are you messing with house or trance, anything like that?
No, not really. I mean, a lot of the DJs I work with, they mess with it, you know? And it's like, I went to see the Chemical Brothers, man. And this has been about 6-7 months ago. That shit was like, whoa, 2 cats and a whole bunch of gear. I just wanted to steal the gear and leave, you know what I mean? But it was really cool to see, because some of the stuff people would call it house and people would call it trance, but some of the stuff wasn't. It was like techno. It was like vintage techno shit from like, you know, the late 70s, early 80s, but they would mix it up and make it thick. And I was digging that stuff, man. I mean, music is music to me, as long as it makes your head nod. I just don't like packaged music, where you go, today we're gonna make a hit record. I hate that kind of shit.
Well, that's like the Triton sounds that you were talking about earlier. I mean, there's a lot of songs that can be pointed out on the radio if you know this gear, where you can point to it and say that's that.
Oh, dude, I would listen to the radio sometimes and I'm like, oh, that's Triton Snare 5. You know what I mean? Oh, there's the kick they use. That's the first kick. And you turn on, man, and that's how they sell their units. But it's not that a Triton is bad, because it's actually a good board if you just get in and make new sounds. But cats don't like to make sounds. I love making sounds, man. I sit around and tweak, and I used to take my synth and get into bed. My girl doesn't like that too much, but I take my synthesizer sometime and I just sit in the bed, get some munchies and get some water and just sit there and make sounds. I don't know what I'm gonna use them for. I just make sounds, and then later on, I'm working on a track, say 6 months later, I'm like, oh shit, I got a sound for that. You know, and I'm kind of trying to find weird. What I like about trance and stuff like that is they found ways to use strings. Because you know, I used to love using strings, but it's like you use them in hip hop. It's like, damn, what is this, opera? You know what I mean? So you gotta find weird ways to kind of. That's why I love Trent Reznor's production, because I think he really stretches and gets the max out of. I mean, he takes synthesizer sounds and runs them through guitar pedals. Shit you're not supposed to do. I love that kind of stuff.
Who are there some other producers out there that you're really
I love Trent. I love I'm crazy about Timbaland, because Timbaland to me is not scared to take hip hop somewhere. But really it's just sounds. I mean, that's a good question, because most producers that I dig don't really do what they dig. They do what other people want. So when I say I like the producer, I guess I like what they've done that I've heard, because they may want to do something that I hate. You know, so I do love, like the Chemical Brothers. I love sonically the way they move stuff around. I love when I put on headphones and you're hearing shit going, you know, jumping around and center channel and jumping behind you. I love that kind of stuff, because I don't understand. I mean, because the next phase is going to be, we're not going to be stereo in about 5 years anyway. It's all going to be surround. Everything's going to be 5.1. You know, you're going to get in your car and there's going to be center channels and rear staging, front staging, left, right. It's going to be, I give it 5 years and we're going to be there. So I like the fact that artists are trying to push towards that. And I do think, especially cats like Trent Reznor, Chemical Brothers, Timbaland, they're going that route already.
Do you have your Pro Tools system set up to mix in 5.1?
Yeah, but I don't mix in 5.1 because nobody can hear it yet. You know, I can't wait to do it. I mean, but you can't do both. I did a 5.1 mix and played it in stereo. Whew. It sounded like somebody stirring a pot of gumbo. It was horrible. You know, it was like the kicks were gone. They were just sloppy. You know, so, but I think everybody will be there pretty soon. 5.1 is definitely the way to go.
So it seems like there's going to be an opening for engineers, people who know how to mix.
Right now there is. Right now, man, I mean, I got friends of mine that only know Pro Tools. That's it. And they can't stop making money, because most artists, especially artists like older rock cats, you know, like, where's the fucking bloody tape? It's like, no, we ain't doing tape no more. So they get some little whiz kid and they pay him a bunch of money to track everything to Pro Tools and mix it. So, or else they fool the artist. Here's another one they do. They get we worked with a Quiet Riot on this benefit thing, and they hate computers. So they roll in this big goddamn tape machine. It's like 350 pounds. These drawers, you got to get in there and tune each channel and all that. And they bring this big tape machine in, and they record them all on tape. And then when they leave, they transfer it all to Pro Tools. And they mixed it, and then they came back, oh, that sounds pretty cool. You know, listening to a CD that was mixed in Pro Tools. So I've always embraced technology. I had Pro Tools from day one. From Pro Tools 2, I think was the version I had. So I've always embraced it, even when it's kind of screwed up. I remember when the first CD turntables came out, you'd grab it to scratch it and be like, "Urgh." You know, it was fucked up, but they got it together now, you know.
So you were saying, we were talking earlier, you got on Serato recently.
Yeah, Serato, it takes DJing to a whole nother level. I can't really speak for the mixing aspect of it, but as far as scratching, especially when you're doing like chirps, you know, like, you know, and when you do it sonically, sometimes you have a tendency to drag the table back past the start of the cut. So when you're cutting, you just start cutting the air like, hey, shit, what's going on here, you know? But with Serato, you can look at the file, and you pull the file back and you pull it back into the middle, and you can chirp all day, and you look real cool on stage. You know, but no, I think it's cool. I think that, I mean, I dabbled with Final Scratch, which was cool, but Serato, to me, that they got it right. Like, I didn't even realize it was a local company.
Oh, it is? I didn't know that.
Rain.
Okay.
Yeah, Rain did it, so I'm hooked on Serato. Like I said, I'm always on the edge, man. Like the new Mackie mixer. I just bought that new Mackie DJ mixer. I forget what it's called, but the crossfader, which anybody in here that DJs knows, you wear a crossfader out, and you're in the middle of DJing or spinning somewhere, and you got the fader off on one table, and the table's still coming through because the fader's shot, and you have to shake it and all that to get it to go out. Well, the new Mackie has like an optical fader, you know, so it's touchless. It doesn't have a fader pot. There's no resistor or nothing. And it's the shit, man. It's just like a little red light in there. And it's just looking at the the trace or whatever it looks at. Yeah, it's
so there's no contacts and it won't?
No contacts.
Where
which I totally get. You know, I'm also like heavy into electronics, so I'm like totally itching to take it apart, but I ain't gonna do that.
Are you selling your music online for downloads? You getting into that?
I was doing it for a little while. Of course, then we wanted to drop a record. We pulled back on it. But I'm totally into it. I'm not really feeling the whole thing Apple's doing because the artists aren't making a lot of money on it. I mean, it doesn't make sense you're selling a download for 99 cents or whatever, and the artist is making a dime or a nickel. That's ludicrous. That's silly. So I think, it's like, why is Apple doing it? I love, don't get me wrong, I got like 5 Macintosh computers at my house, so I love their computers, but why is Apple doing it? How come the artists aren't, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They're doing what we should be doing.
Well, it seems like there's more opportunity there for the independent person to get in and do it.
Yeah.
It's similar to distribution, I guess. Apple playing the part of a major, and the iTunes store being their distribution network.
Yeah, and Apple's only doing what everybody in this room could have done. It's not like it costs us a lot of money to say, if one guy in this room had an idea, and everybody else in this room had an album, they go to that one guy puts all their albums online, and that's it. It's the same thing. I mean, well, yeah, Apple can run commercials during the Super Bowl. That's a little bit different, but I mean, I don't want any artist to ever look at this kind of stuff and go, that's untouchable, it's unobtainable. I can't get there, because you can.
Mm-hmm. Great. Yeah. Well, let's open it up now and see what everybody out there has to say.
How much do you DJ anymore?
I'll tell you something, man. I used to love DJing and stuff, because I'm crazy about like cutting, scratching. That's, to me, it's a lost art in hip hop. Is the turntables. I think it was like the guitar solo was the rock, and we got away from it. But man, the shit you guys do now, whoo, my God. I was trying to crab scratch yesterday, and it was like I was getting arthritis, man. So I still dabble with it, but I'm not gonna get on stage and use the Mix-a-Lot name and try to front like I'm a DJ and take a real DJ out of a job, because I didn't like it when I was coming up, because you guys do this shit every day. So, you know, and a lot of guys do that. You get guys like Boy George. Boy George goes out and DJs clubs, and he ain't shit. I mean, I could do what he's doing, but he's Boy George. But to me, that position should be taken by a real DJ, a cat who really works at the art form, because it is an art form.
Hi, I wanted to ask about a famous video that was banned on television because it had some soapy breasts up against a glass window. Maybe you could tell that little story for us.
One of my pervert people, I like that. Yeah, there was a video we did, just to rewind, this was the second album, it was after Baby Got Back, and sitting in a room with Rick Rubin, and we're trying to figure out, how do we get their attention? And of course, every artist, the album after a hit, they want to reconnect with the streets. And I was telling Rick, man, we got to do something. I just don't want to do another pop hit and that's it. He said, well, look, you got this song, Put 'Em on the Glass. Why don't you do a video to it? And just so you know, Put 'Em on the Glass is, everybody here's over 21, right? Yeah, I've been cussing the whole time, I hope so. Put 'Em on the Glass is like this just tacky, senseless song about tits, for lack of a better description. And so he said, well, look, why don't we do a video? I'm like, dude, they can't do a video to that. He said, exactly. Well, back then you had a video channel called Video Jukebox here in the States. And Video Jukebox would play real edgy stuff because they didn't want to be like MTV. So we do this video to Put 'Em on the Glass. Total, like, nudity. It was really stupid, man. It was like cars. Back then, nobody used cars, so I was like the car guy. I had all my cars in this parking lot, topless girls and washing cars and just total stupid, immature stuff. So we put this video on, we give it to MTV because we knew they wouldn't play it, right? MTV turned it down, which is what we wanted. So we went to Video Jukebox with a edited version that had, the boobs blurred out. And Video Jukebox played it because MTV wouldn't. So the song hits, right? Oh man, Put 'Em on the Glass, it's huge. And we run these commercials like, the video that MTV didn't want you to see. Knowing they're not gonna play this nude video with cussing in it. And anyway, it kind of backfired in that the song, it hit. I mean, the song took off. It was #1 on Video Jukebox for like 2 months. Well, we had no records. The records weren't ready yet. I wasn't even done with the album. We did it as a joke because we thought we'd get banned, and then we promote it later as this artist that nobody wanted you to see because we didn't want to be seen as the pop boy. And we didn't know it would hit, and we didn't have records ready. Boy, you're talking about embarrassing. We probably lost about 500,000 record sales not having that record ready, but that video is legendary for some reason. Everywhere I go, people are like, man, can I get a copy of Put 'Em on the Glass? And somebody stole mine, so. Yeah, that was an interesting video. Good question. I didn't think that would come up.
You mentioned some new songs we're going to be hearing in the next couple of years. Without giving too much away, I was wondering if you could elaborate and maybe on where the sound is going and maybe some new influences.
Yeah, I got, I've been recording some songs myself, but it's been organic. And what I mean by that, I'm not sitting down going, I want to make an album. I mean, I don't want to be the world's first 50-year-old rapper trying to make hit records, you know what I mean? So it's just happening organically. If it happens, it happens. But I do have some other artists, a young lady, her name is Tamika Williams. And the first thing I noticed about her is she's that big, you know what I mean? She's like 120 pounds, but she sounds like an elephant. You know what I mean? Just power, real soulful, deep, rich sound. And she sings way beyond her years because a lot of young singers have problems with vibrato. They either sound like a billy goat or they sound flat. There's like no in between. She has all that worked out. And we started on an R&B record, which, to be honest with you, is kind of boring. But that's what she wanted to do. And all of a sudden, the guitar player from Out of Sight's group came over and they started vibing. And they came up with this sound that it would be, I guess you could call it like Evanescence meets Aretha Franklin. I mean, it was just this weird, soulful, big sound that was full of instrumentation, cool chord progressions and bridges and fat stuff. And it ended up being like this kind of alternative R&B sound. And we're gonna probably release her stuff. A lot of labels have expressed interest. My lawyer's gonna start shopping her, but we have rules. It's gotta be, the album has to be left alone. So that's one artist. Her album's gonna be really solid. She has a song called Black Hood, which is a song about reaping what you sow. Basically, what you do in life, do you think about the day you die? Where you have to pay for it. It's a cool track. Out of Sight is another cat I'm working with who has been in the business a long time. His perspective on the business is a lot like my own, even though he's never put out a big hit record. Very sharp, lyrics are deep, and his thing would be kind of like Eminem meeting Korn, really. And he's very important sounding. He hates talking about cars and girls. I'm like, oh, he's already better than me. You know? I mean, it's not his thing. So those are two of the artists, and then my stuff has really been, I'm all over the place. I mean, some of my stuff is like vintage, kind of Posse on Broadway, heavy bass, knock your window out, kind of hip hop, and then some of it's been borderline like rock stuff, and I'm letting other people come in and touch it. I love a lot of outer influence. I love people that don't come from the record business per se, but they are in the music. I love those people coming in and touching the stuff. So,
Looking forward to it. Cool.
yeah, 06 will be crazy, hopefully.
Yeah, I also wanted to ask about, because you spoke about how you're producing nowadays, the tools that you're using, but I guess a lot of us are probably very interested into what equipment you used back in the 80s, and maybe, you know, some of the old school electro influences that you can hear in your music.
That's what I was saying earlier. I use, it's kind of weird the way I produce. When I go in my studio, I have what's called my quick hit stuff. And what I mean by that, I have like a Roland, a little MC909, and an XV5080, and an old like real Casio controller or whatever, because it's real small, I can sit it on my lap. So when I have an idea, I'll jump in the studio and I have these little digital voice recorders, and I put the idea on that first. And then I sit down and I just, whatever's on, I start making music on it. So it may be like I don't use my old stuff anymore because it really doesn't, you know, as far as MIDI, and it, you know, it didn't have the multi-timbral features and all that stuff I need nowadays. So I have a tendency to go to that Akai, the old trusty Akai 2000 or the MC909, and I make just one 4-bar beat, and that's where it starts. And then I start dabbling with titles and feels, and if a song feels wicked, I look for a wicked title. You know, you get that wicked title and you get your subject matter, and you start dabbling and writing and making stuff, and I write the whole song, then I go back and produce the song around what I've written. So as far as equipment goes, I mean, whatever's on. If I see a light flashing, I just start hitting keys. I mean, I really don't have any particular thing
But I mean, just like, you know, when you were writing a song like Baby Got Back, you know,
back in the day. Yeah, I remember, well, I can go way back. Like when I did Posse on Broadway, to give you an example, I always wanted that 808, boom, ding, 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 boom, boom. I love that shit because the first time I heard it was, I think, Tila Rock, and then the Beastie Boys, Slow and Low. That's where I got the idea for Posse on Broadway. So I went in and took a bunch of my old drum machines. I had what was it called? Oberheim DMX. That's what I used on my first album, Oberheim DMX. I had a couple of other weird sequential circuits. I forget what that thing was called. I had the first Roland Dr. Rhythm, you know, so I had all this old shit, and I went and traded it all in and bought an 808. And I turned the decay up on the 808 as long as I could turn it up. I mean, I wanted that drum to last so long, I wanted to go pee and come back, it was still hanging, you know, it's boom, and so I got into that on Posse on Broadway. When I did Baby Got Back, everything had gotten, you know, far more, you know, it's a lot of techno kind of mixed up in it, and I was always into like Kraftwerk. Kraftwerk was like the group that got me in the drum machines, really. And I wanted to keep that same 808 sound, but an 808 sucks when you MIDI it up and sync it to other units. So that's when I got into the Akai. That's when I bought, I think, the MPC 60 is how I produced Baby Got Back. I took the MPC 60, I synced it up with what was it back then? I think it was my Jupiter 8. Yeah, it was my Jupiter 8. And there was an old song called More Fun to Compute by Kraftwerk. And I think it was played in C. It was like boom, 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 boom. Listen to Baby Got Back. Boom, 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 boom. That's all it was. And then I just took the same notes and did the. It was all based on that. That's where I kind of got it from, listening to something else, and took that thing, and that's where the idea came from.
So what other stuff were you listening to? Were you listening to like Egyptian Lover? Or,
Oh, yes.
All that kind of stuff?
Oh, yeah, Egyptian Lover, we both come from the same school, basically. So Egyptian Lover was listening to, you know, if you listen to that, I'll give you like Egypt, Egypt, which is like his biggest song. He was doing that breathing in. Well, all that came from Kraftwerk Trans-Europe Express. No, not Trans-Europe Express, I'm sorry, Tour de France. And when they did Tour de France, it was like this bike. They were doing all this cool shit. It wasn't sex, and we turned it into sex. And you know, we started doing this breathing and these weird, they used to have this sound called a pity pat in Kraftwerk stuff. It was like this little electronic click, and they would make this, you know, it made the songs move faster, you know, and that's what kind of shaped the West Coast sound in the early days, which was basically the kind of the German, really clean, clinical German techno stuff combined with, you know, the big, heavy bottom end that we were getting from New York. And that's where the West Coast, early West Coast techno all came from.
Because, I mean, it's interesting that you use the word techno as well, because, you know, we had Arabian Prince a few weeks ago, and he was saying the same thing about a time on the West Coast when, you know, the words techno, rap, and electro were all interchangeable. People were listening to Cybertron as much as they were listening to whatever else. So it's just for our generation, we're not really used to that. You know, we have really defined ideas of what electro is, what techno is, and
neither have we. You know, I mean, we just called anything that sounded electronic techno. We just called it techno, you know what I mean? And then they had like industrial, which was really different because it was, I used to love that industrial stuff because it was like nasty sounding. It wasn't, because the stuff we did was really perfect. You know, it was really clean. The snares were really crisp and clean, and the frequencies were bright. And then this kind of industrial stuff came, and that's what I think gave birth to your Trent Reznors, is that it had this distorted, murky, kind of saturated, overloaded kind of sound. It really gave it a new energy. And I got into that too, so yeah, I don't know. I guess we all feed off of one another, I guess. But you gotta watch that now, you get sued.
Have you ever been sued?
Oh yeah, I've been sued a couple of times. I got sued by one dude, and I can't say his name because we agreed when we settled not to. But you'll probably call him in to talk one day. I got sued by one guy that actually went and produced the song after I released my song. So basically what I'm saying is, he went and listened to my song, did another song, because my song hadn't been properly copywritten yet, and said, hey, I produced that years ago. And thank God for Roger Lynn. Roger Lynn is the creator of the Akai MPC. Roger Lynn listened to his stuff and listened to my stuff, and he had a way of telling when the files were created, and mine were created like 2 years before his. So, and he said he recorded the song in the 80s, but I don't want to get into no names, but yeah. And then I've had a couple other issues that, one of them I lost, which is kind of interesting. I kind of lied. I paid $100,000. He's happy, but he was an artist that was, what it was. We kind of, be honest, we kind of stole the same thing at the same time. Basically, we both heard the same thing, interpreted it the same way, and ended up producing the same thing, or something similar. I mean, the songs aren't identical, but you could definitely hear where we both kind of listened. If Kraftwerk wanted to sue us, they could have sued both of us probably. Well, you know, that's how you know, that was a pretty fun lawsuit. But once I realized he was just an artist trying to make it, I just said, let's just settle. I didn't want to crush him, so let's just settle and give him a little money and we move on. You know, so yeah, so be careful with how you get influenced. Listen to the feel, not the notes. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else got something to say? Seattle people out there?
Are there some Seattle people in the house?
Few Seattle people.
Seatown!
Yeah.
You still got any butter biscuits, tapes, spread that wrap, all that stuff?
What about it?
Still have that? Like, masters?
Yeah, I got a suitcase, and the shit would probably explode if you put it in a deck, but I got a suitcase with a bunch of old cassettes, old 4-track cassettes, and I can't find a 4-track to play it in, but like I said, I know I had some old 24-track stuff from the big 2-inch reels, and I tried to put one of those on the deck, and I tore the guy's heads up. It just disintegrated. So I mean, that stuff is so old. But yeah, I still got the old masters, the old first 4-track square dance rap. And what Jonathan's talking about is that back in the day, I used to record stuff in my house, and I used to sell it just out of my window to make a little money and stuff. And there was a song I did called Square Dance Rap, which was crazy. It was like, what I did, I didn't want people to know it was me, because we were doing this, we were mocking country music. So I didn't want people to know it was my vocal, because I was talking like this, that kind of shit. So we took the track and we recorded it at high speed on the cassette, on the 4-track. And we turned the speed all the way down, and I did the rap real slow with an accent, you know. Sir Mix-a-Lot Ray on the wheels of steel. And when you turn it up, it was like this Smurf. Sir Mix-a-Lot Ray on the wheels of... And everybody thought it was another character. They thought I just did the music and cut in it, but I actually recorded the whole vocal. And that was supposed to be like a joke, and the shit hit. Right? So now I do concerts right now, and people are like, man, you didn't do square dance rap. I'm like, what am I supposed to do, man? Inhale helium? Or, you know, so we do a little intro where I scratch the whole vocal over the top of it. But yeah, that's some old stuff. I recorded that song in like '82. You know, that was like, hip hop was so new then that people were doing really dumb stuff. I mean, really, there was some dumb shit out. Seriously. Yeah, Rappin' Duke, yeah, that's another one. Yeah, Rappin' Duke was a cat, did John Wayne. He did a perfect John Wayne, and I thought the dude was white. You know what I mean? There's no way in the world no black dude could sit up, da-ha, da-ha. When I met him, he was like, black as that turntable. I was like, damn. But then he sounded, but people were doing anything kind of trying to get heard back in the day, because, you know, you weren't gonna get radio play, so you had to get noticed. You know, so people started stealing like TV themes. You know, I remember when Dougie Fresh, the Inspector Gadget thing. You do that now, you get your drawers suit off. So, but you can get away with it back then. I don't know what the statute is, but a whole lot of us would be broke if they came back at us over that stuff.
I'm definitely like one of those kids that came up with fresh tracks.
Yeah.
And from what I remember, I think it was like a new song every week kind of thing. Was it kind of similar to that?
Yeah, Nes he would go to New York, man, because, you know, let's face it, New York was like, it still is, the hip-hop mecca, man. So he would go to New York and have stuff shipped out from New York, man, and it was like fresh out of the crate. I remember when he broke, you probably remember this, he broke the Roxanne battle. It had never been heard, and he played the UTFO version, and he had Shantae doing a cussing version of a response, and then the real rock, he had all that stuff before it was even on the West Coast. And I was like, oh, a battle, you know, it was hot. You listen to that shit now, I was like, that was stupid as hell. But back then, that was like hot to hear all this like, you know, real underground stuff on, and Fresh Tracks was a cool vehicle. And it was a shame when they took it away, you know. I'd love to see something like that again in every city, actually.